Every gun that is made, every warship launched, every rocket fired signifies in the final sense a theft from those who hunger and are not fed, those who are cold and not clothed. These are the words of Dwight D Eisenhower. He was the 34th President of the United States of America. Eisenhower also said this in 1953.
The cost of one modern heavy bomber is this: a modern brick school in more than 30 cities. It is 2 electric power plants, each serving a town of 60,000 population. It is 2 fine, fully equipped hospitals. It is some 50 miles of concrete pavement. We pay for a single fighter plane with 500,000 bushels of wheat. We pay for a single destroyer with new homes that could have housed more than 8,000 people.
Later in his presidency, Eisenhower would issue a dire warning, a warning about the dangers of the military-industrial complex. He described it as a threat to democracy. He raised concerns about the costs of an arms race with the Soviet Union, how it would take away resources from other developmental projects, like building schools and hospitals. Half a century later, the Soviet Union has died. Now one man has begun a quest to revive it: Vladimir Putin. He is waging war in Ukraine. The last 2 months have been described as the darkest hours in Europe since World War II. The invasion began in February. Over 2 months have passed. Who is winning this war? The military-industrial complex. Not Russia, certainly not Ukraine. They're caught in what we call a frozen conflict. It's the defense companies and contractors who are winning this war. Hello and welcome to Gravitas Plus. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay, and tonight we'll tell you about the players who would not want wars to end. The global arms bazaar is controlled by a handful of big players. From 2016 to 2020, the United States, Russia, France, China, the United Kingdom and Germany exported 80% of the world's weapons. Barring China, every country on this list is directly involved in the Ukraine conflict. Russia is the aggressor. The US, the UK, France and Germany are all arming Ukraine. And by the way, out of these 6 countries, 5 are permanent members of the United Nations Security Council. So much for their commitment to international peace and security. But there's one country that maintains a towering presence in the global arms bazaar, and that's the United States of America. It accounts for 37% of the global exports. And this makes the US the biggest exporter of major weapons. Why does the US dominate this market? Because it is home to the top 5 manufacturers in the world: Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Northrop Grumman, Raytheon and General Dynamics. All 5 are American companies. Together, they sold more than $160 billion worth of weapons in 2019. As they say, war is good for business. So when Russia's war in Ukraine began, the stock prices of American defense companies soared. Shares of Raytheon shot up by 8%, General Dynamics 12%, Lockheed Martin 18% and Northrop Grumman a whopping 22%. Weapons of many of these companies are now in the battlefields of Ukraine. I'm talking about lethal equipment like Switchblade drones, armored and tactical vehicles, howitzers, javelin missiles, and thousands of rifles, pistols, machine guns, and shotguns. Since the war began, America has committed over $3 billion in weapons in Ukraine, but almost all of it came from existing American government stockpiles. Recently, we even saw some correction in stock prices of defense companies, but make no mistake, weapons contractors will emerge as the big winners of this war. Of course, with some help from the US government. In April, there was a classified meeting at the Pentagon. The US Defense Department called their largest defense contractors. 8 CEOs attended this meeting. Also present was the US Deputy Secretary of Defense. What was on the agenda? 3 objectives were listed: delivering critical supplies to Ukraine, enhancing American preparedness, and supporting allies and partners. Basically, this was the US government telling these contractors, we'll need more weapons. The American stockpile is not unlimited after all. It will have to be replenished. And American lawmakers plan to pour big money into this. Feed the military-industrial complex that can churn out more weapons. Who wants the war to end? Two programs are expected to finance this procurement. One is the Pentagon's Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative. The other is the U.S. State Department's Foreign Military Financing Program. They have budgets that run into billions of dollars. The Pentagon has been given $3.5 billion to replenish the inventories. That's $1.75 billion more than what the American president asked for. The U.S. State Department's program has been boosted too. An additional $150 million was recently given for the war in Ukraine, but the U.S. president is not satisfied. Joe Biden has asked the U.S. Congress for another $33 billion. This is supposed to be aid for Ukraine. But in this package, $20 billion will be set aside just for weapons. Where do you think all that money will go? Into the pockets of defense contractors, American defense contractors. And they're absolutely unapologetic about this. Consider what the CEO of Raytheon recently said. This is Greg Hayes in January this year, well before the war in Ukraine began. We are seeing, I would say, opportunities for international sales. The tensions in Eastern Europe, the tensions in the South China Sea, all of those things are putting pressure on some of the defense spending over there. So I fully expect we are going to see some benefit from it. 3 months after that statement, Hayes said he will not apologize for profiteering from the Ukraine war. This is what he told the Harvard Business Review. So I make no apology for that, I think. Again, recognizing we are there to defend democracy, and the fact is, eventually we will see some benefit in the business over time. Well, that's their defense. We are defending democracy, they say, and making some money while we are at it. What do you make of these claims? Are American weapons transfers really about defending democracy? Who is buying American weapons? Let's look at some of the deals that were closed by the Biden administration. Barely weeks after Joe Biden's inauguration as president, the United States approved a sale of surface-to-air missiles to Egypt. In the following months, America sold missiles to Chile, F-16 aircraft and missiles to the Philippines, Javelins to Thailand, air-to-air missiles to Saudi Arabia. None of these countries have shining human rights records. But the U.S. is selling billions of dollars worth of weapons to all of them. And American defense contractors are profiting from all these deals. The worst fears of President Eisenhower are being realized. The military-industrial complex is enriching itself from the Ukraine war. Now, we're not saying that Ukraine should not be given weapons. One cannot deny the fact that Ukraine needs help. But does Ukraine really need all of these weapons that are being poured into the country? What about America arming autocrats? The exit from Afghanistan was supposed to halt the American war machine. It has just shifted gears and turned towards Ukraine because for defense companies to make money, the war must go on.